he has really aced this in many, many settings already. So Fred is at B Psychology, is just joined the team there, and is really very proactive. So please don't hesitate to ask any of your questions, but listen to what he has to say, because he has a lot to share. And you have to see his Instagram page. Seems very interesting. I hope, Fred, that you're going to share that with us, because I'm sure that many of them would appreciate that. Thank you so much, and thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, Susie. That was a lovely introduction. Thank you. Just first things first. So I just want to share my so can you guys see my screen? Can you confirm you can see?
Yes.
Right.
We can. One of my favorite psychologists there, Jordan Peterson. He's amazing, isn't he?
Jordan Peterson is my idol. I use him. I use a lot of his dragon stuff in my work. A lot of his talks, a lot of his demeanor, his style, everything, his mannerisms. I listen to him all day, every day.
Yeah, he is awesome, and very often misunderstood. If people just listen to what he's saying, like, journalists tend to attack him, don't they?
Well, you know, the more popular you get, the more under the bullseye you also become. And, you know, I went to McGill as well, his alma mater. So and obviously he's extolled within the McGill ranks, but
wow,
the idea is to be known here as well. Maybe one day we can collaborate to bring him to Dubai for a talk.
His daughter was here 2 weeks ago, I think.
Yeah. Well, I think he'd be very happy that we're talking about him in his absence. Just guys, can you confirm? Can you see my slides and my face?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
So I'm gonna begin. All right. So, esteemed counselors, thank you so much for joining me here today on this warm afternoon. The lovely winter days are behind us, and we are slowly welcoming summer. But with that, with summer comes the end of an academic year, and, you know, the beginning of a new one. So there's always new opportunities. And what I want to discuss with you guys today is a topic that I have been very interested in for the better part of a year. I do have an Instagram page called Project Hippocampus, and it deals with different aspects of technology crossed with human psychology. So I speak about video games, social media, internet, Netflix, Zoom, basically things that we can easily be oblivious to because of how ingrained they are in the DNA of our lives. But with that said, you know, human psychology is not impervious to the harmful effects that technology poses. And today I'm going to focus on gaming and social media. So understandably, part one is called the game station generation. All right, now this PowerPoint obviously is made for students. So I did delete some slides, but I want to show you how I speak to students, so you also gauge an understanding of how I think is a good way to convey the messages from this presentation to them. All students who meet me on this webinar have their laptops, which also has a CPU. And when I talk to them about the laptop CPU and cross that with the brain CPU, which is the frontal lobe, and then we dive into the reward center and the you know, how dopamine plays a role in regulating reward and making us feel good. And when we link that to gaming, guys, this is what the focus of my talk is: how gaming is used as a coping mechanism to cope with boredom, stress, emotional emptiness, and whatnot, especially in today's time. COVID, I always think that, I've been thinking for a while that COVID kind of brought with it the DSM-6. It kind of rewrote psychology because of how everything changed, but it also embellished these coping mechanisms because we spend a lot of time at home. So we kind of normalize technology. So linking the reward circuitry and dopamine to gaming, and then obviously psychology, is what's going to happen right now. Now, in hopes of keeping this a balanced argument, and I always start with talking about the benefits that video gaming does have on cognitive faculties, of which are plenty. And I start with attention. So studies have shown that video games video gamers' attention abilities are superior than those who do not play video games. The visually rich content in an action video game like Counter-Strike, those that involve killing and stuff, the landscapes are constantly changing, and you also have to focus on one or two stimuli while at the same time ignore potential distractors. So that really does help flex your attentional muscles while you game, and that can improve selective attention in video gamers. Besides that, vision. So when you talk about adventure games like Fortnite, in which you are a character and you have to navigate this virtual world, you are constantly navigating through changing colors, landscapes, items like buildings and cars and stuff. And the visually rich content in these games as well, they do help flex your ocular muscles, because you're again, similar to attention. If you look at this guy on the right here, you're focusing on discerning so many different backgrounds and so many different objects from their background, which flexes the eyes and helps improve what is known as the contrast sensitivity function, something that we use at night often. So when you're driving down Sheikh Zayed Road and you look at 3 towers, even at night, you can discern which one is red, green, and blue and whatnot. And that's because of the CSF, the contrast sensitivity function, which happens to be trained during heavy gaming. We also have memory, and this is a logical one. I mean, when you navigate a virtual world, you're memorizing a map. You're going from one city to another on the map. You're memorizing the distance, the location. You're also memorizing where your enemies are on the game. So that does help. Studies have shown neuronal growth does occur in the hippocampus in games, especially 3D video games. Games like Tetris have been used to kind of recycle traumatic memories in patients with PTSD. The exact science behind it is explained on my page, but obviously, for the purposes of this talk, anxiety and depression are the furthest I'll go. But obviously, we can't put full stop there, can we? So now that I've spoken about the benefits, I've already kind of gauged the students' attention, so they now confirm that I'm not going to be biased. When you talk about the neuroscience of gaming, this is where we really have to be careful. So when going back to what I said, when you have these games like World of Warcraft, which this is the map of World of Warcraft, it kind of resembles the real world map, continents, oceans. The northern continent is icy like the North Pole. And how you have the jungly and the forest and the tropical stuff. So it's meant to reflect real world maps. Now, studies have shown that heavy video gamers who play these games have an underdeveloped striatum nucleus, which is actually a part of the right hemisphere that helps us form an internal map of the world. And why is this important, guys? For you as well, when you call your friend and you say, come over, if they tell you, well, Emirates Mall is to my left, what do I do? You can easily say, first traffic light right, second roundabout left, third roundabout U-turn, fourth villa on your left. Now that's a very impressive thing to do from memory. But those features are within what is known as your internal map, because they bear meaning to you. Now, heavy gamers have a diminished ability in navigating the real world, and they have to navigate using landmarks because of their underdeveloped striatum nucleus. When they spend so much time on a virtual world, they underappreciate how far one city is from another, because their brain is focused on how far one city is from another in a game, which is not transferable to real world. So that reduces the effect of their internal map in real life. So instead of saying second roundabout left and whatnot, they'll have to say, search for an EPCO gas station. And then when you reach school, give me a call, I'll give you further directions. It might be a bit more challenging for them. Besides that, this is a very important point here, guys, emotional damping. Now, many parents who I've spoken with about this, they always ask, can my son play killing games or, games that involve blood and violence and stuff like that? I always answer using this. Now, obviously on the surface of things, killing games will always be looked at with a finer tooth comb than with like SimCity or Tetris. Those seem to be very innocent games. And there's a reason behind it, guys. See, when you look at human neuropsychology. If you look at, for example, soldiers who go to war. When soldiers go to war, there's a large proportion of them who come back with a mental condition, whether it's trauma, anxiety, depression, or even insomnia. And that goes to show you that when we harm another human being, our brain, especially our emotional centers, they do pay a price for that. In a game, when you're killing someone else, even though you, the person playing the game, you know that that's a virtual person. That person doesn't exist, doesn't have a name, face, family, it's fine. Our brains don't really discern a real threat from a fake threat. So, that's why when you talk about, for example, people who have anxiety about dogs, someone who has severe dog phobia, if they think about the mere thought of a dog attacking them will trigger a very similar response in the brain as if the dog was right there. The brain doesn't discern whether or not the threat is right there before you or it's not. So with that logic, when you are killing someone in a game, your amygdala actually, and studies have even shown that the rostral anterior cingulate cortex is involved in this, have reduced activity. And the reason why is they want to protect your person from feeling the emotional stress of killing someone else. And that does happen in killing games. And essentially the amygdala dampens or anesthetizes emotions so that when you leave the game, you don't feel bad for killing someone else. Now that does have implications for people who are at risk for developing panic attacks and or panic disorder, because those stimuli, those images in the game will be registered by your brain, and maybe can manifest later on, maybe 6 hours later when you go to bed, or 2 days later when you encounter something similar. And it's really important to make that distinction. And lastly, this is a rather straightforward one. The reward center overload. Now, logically, guys, if you do something that makes you feel good, you're going to want to do it again. And games, they do fill many criteria that constitute as good. They alleviate boredom. They provide instant gratification. They allow you to distract yourself from, the boons of society. And you feel good when you play a game, essentially. And you're in control of what happens. You control your friends, you control who sees your profile and whatnot. So this can result in a gaming addiction or disorder. It's not the game in itself which is addictive, rather the consequences of gaming, which are all modulated by a release of dopamine in the brain. And we'll talk more about this in the next few slides. But forgive me for powering through this for a bit. I really want to leave some time for discussion, and we do have a lot of things to cover. Now, this is an interesting one here, guys, because when you talk about ADHD in general, the student population who I speak with usually tend to be the 14s to 16s, maybe even the 13s to 16s. And while the prevalence of ADHD tends to be like the 9s, the 12s, and the 13s, it's usually at the later teen ages where you start to really see the symptoms of ADHD become a problem, especially if left unresolved. That's when school gets harder. That's when social relationships become more demanding. That's when you're expected to behave in a certain way. Puberty also. So this is where it really becomes an issue. And gaming and ADHD do have a very unique relationship. If you understand the ADHD brain, it's one that can be easily absorbed. It's one that can be easily lured into a trap, if you want to call it. And once it's lured into this trap, it's very difficult to take it out of that trap. This goes to show you how attentional resources are, I'm not going to say scarce, but limited in an ADHD brain. When you look at games, like this game on the right, for example, see, gaming companies are, bloodsuckers, if I can say. They have psychologists on the team with them to help them make the game more addictive. They exploit the brains of youth just to make more money. And we can blame them all we want, but that's just not going to change. In a game like this, you constantly see flickering lights, changing of colors, maybe different soundtracks, a new object appearing out of nowhere. All of these features serve as short bursts of attention. which keep the ADHD brain in that net, in that fishing net, and make it much more harder for it to escape. And it just creates this attentional cycle where the brain wants more. And now the brain has perceived this game as a source of potential dopamine because it's giving it short bursts of attention, short hits of attention. And this is problematic, not just for kids with ADHD, even typical kids, but it's just more problematic for kids with ADHD because they don't have, or rather they lack the ability to disengage and go continue their math homework, as we've seen, as I'm sure you've seen. But typical kids have a higher, I would probably say a more regulated frontal lobe that can tell them that, you know what, buddy, come on, we have math homework to do in an hour. Mom is going to be very pissed at us if we don't finish it. Now that analysis might not be the case in kids with ADHD. And that's why I think it's important to give them special attention, at least in the time being. Now, when you combine the ADHD's susceptibility to the effects of gaming with the fact that gaming can be used as an extremely attractive coping mechanism, gaming addictions can likely occur, not just in kids with ADHD and typical kids as well, but obviously more likely in kids with ADHD. And
Maybe
some of the excuse me?
Mary?
Mute everybody.
Sorry. So when you talk about gaming addiction, guys, the side effects of gaming addiction are rather obvious. Impaired sleep, definitely that's one of them. Not just because the kid spends a lot of time on the computer, but once they're done with the game at like 1 a.m. or 2 a.m., the amount of melatonin released in the brain from the light is barely anything. It's barely enough to put him to sleep. So when the child goes to bed, his eyes are like this because for the past 6 hours, the eye was receiving so much blue light. So it's like the brain was being tricked to think that the sun was actually up. And that's why it's harder for them to go to sleep, even at that late hour. And then they go to school at 7:30 in the morning. After 4 hours of sleep, 3 hours of sleep, and they're expected to cognitively perform throughout the whole day. Then they go home at 4 p.m. and crash. And that's just not a functional cycle. Improper feeding, again, that's a very normal one. There's not much activity going on. It's a very sedentary lifestyle, so not much need for for food. Poor academic performance and mental conditions are, some of the unwanted side effects of gaming. Now, when we talk about the link between video gaming and depression, see, when you analyze the depressed mind, two brain regions tend to stand out, which are the hippocampus and limbic system, both of which are underdeveloped in people with depression. Now, in gamers and heavy gamers, those two brain regions are the ones that are mostly activated for obvious reasons. The reward center when you're playing a game is on fire, especially when you play a game that involves steps. So you completed a step, the next step, the next step, the next step. Each time you complete a step, the reward center is just shooting fireworks in the brain until you get that final goal, and it's just a fire show. But in people with depression, not much activity happens in their life. It's a vicious cycle of social withdrawal and disturbed relationships. So not much to be happy about. So with that logic, you would say, well, then Fred, the neurological opposite of depression is gaming. So to just prescribe gaming to anyone who has depression, forget about CBT and all these other therapies. Obviously, that's not the case, because if you look at the symptoms of depression, the symptoms of depression are almost identical to the symptoms of gaming addiction. Poor social skills, overeating or undereating, poor sleep, poor concentration are all symptoms of depression and are all symptoms of gaming addictions. So if gaming is used to escape depression, while yes, it will give the students short-term relief, that's inarguable. In the long run, it does put the students in a worse position than they were when they began. And this is not because the student themselves is weak. No, it's because gaming does present with several avenues for escape. That the student will just say, you know what, this is easy, right here, right now, go approach. Not much avoidance there. Whatever the student wants to achieve while gaming, especially if the student is depressed, he or she will definitely find more reasons or more benefits of gaming. And this is where we're going to move on to the anxiety section. Now, if you look at kids with anxiety, especially now in the kids at in the kids at your schools, you're going to find that maybe some GAD, some social anxiety, and I think that's a very common condition to find, especially now with COVID. Our social skills were not given much practice over the past year, especially with all of this distance stuff. So when you turn to gaming, and bearing in mind, guys, that a hallmark feature in anxiety is avoidance. When you look at games like Runescape, and guys, pay attention to the names of these games, especially if your students are playing them, because each game does have a different relationship with psychology. But Runescape and World of Warcraft, these are MMOs. These are multiplayer games where they essentially try to mimic real world and put it into a game. In these games, you are doing things which you would do in the real world, like visit a bank, go fishing, buy something from a store, trade with other people. So it does include facets of life that we experience on a daily basis. But here's the difference. In kids with social anxiety, for example, who don't want to go to class for some reason, leave aside the most common one, they don't want to speak in public, or let's just say something even simpler than that. Let's say there's a bully in class that they don't like, or let's say they don't like the teacher. There's a million reasons why social anxiety will manifest for a teenager. These games provide an excellent way out, because on these games, you choose who's your friend. You choose who will discuss things with you. And at the same time, all your flaws or your perceived flaws for which you are bullied or attacked are all hidden behind a screen. And you get to play this, you know how Carl Jung called it, this persona or this mask. And he also spoke about the shadow. So you get to hide your shadow. No one gets to see your shadow. No one gets to see the parts of yourself that you hate the most. Maybe a weird freckle on your face, or something wrong with your eye, or just the way your nose looks. You get to hide all of those things behind a screen, and you get to project a persona, the ideal self that you want to project on a game. And especially if you're good at that game, all of a sudden you taste that sense of accomplishment. And let's say, for example, your bully plays that game as well, and he is not as good as you. That does give you a fleeting sense of dominance over your most feared bully. But it's a virtual one, and it's not reflective of what's going to happen tomorrow in math class. So this is how anxiety can be mitigated using gaming. But just like with depression, there are long-term consequences, because there will be much less of an incentive to practice your social skills or expose yourself to these situations which you are fearing, because you know that, why should I face my bully? I can just go back home, play online, and I can beat him in the game, which would suffice for a kid who's 14 to 15, especially at that age. Your social cortex is not fully developed. It's not like when you're 18 or 19, where you have much more niche interests in life, like med school or law school. You don't really care about what other people think. But when you're 14 or 15, all you care about is what other people think about you. Am I going to find a prom date and whatnot? So, our social spidey senses when you're that age are on fire, and any weird way someone looks at you can be translated through a biased lens of hostility, which is why these games are very attractive. But going back to what I said about the emotional damping in the amygdala, when you're playing these games of killing, in a game like Counter-Strike, the words death, slay, kill, and shoot, or blood and knife and stab are good. It means you win. You have won the game. But when you look, and this is for all of us, guys, every human being in the world has this internal alarm system, IAS. It's always on. It's used to detect potential dangers in your environment and protect you from them. So let's say you're walking in the playground and someone throws a ball. You move out of the way. Your internal alarm system detected a potential threat and enacted corrective action to shield you from potential damage. That's okay, that's good. But in people with anxiety, especially younger people with anxiety who have not fully understood what danger means, the IAS is always active, even in situations which are potentially safe, like math class, or at home with my family, or walking in the mall. These situations, it's very unlikely physical damage will occur to your body. But in those situations, the IAS is still active. Now, going back to these keywords, death, slay, kill, and whatnot, these words are perceived as good because it means you're winning. Now, because they're perceived as good, dopamine is being released. If dopamine is being released, you do them again. But these words also trigger the IAS in people with anxiety because they suggest danger. In no one is death, slay, shoot, or kill good. There are always going to be dangerous elements. But now there's a confusion. So your reward system is saying reward, dopamine, but your IAS is saying threat detected. So what do we do? In cases like this, guys, these games can prime anxiety in real life. And what we find, what can happen is when you're killing things on a game, you're having fun, whatever. But then, you might go home, you might go back to bed, you might just go chill, and you might face a panic attack. And you don't know why it happened. Why did this happen? I mean, I'm calm. But these primers can activate the IAS to a point where it manifests as an anxiety attack. And the best example I can think of is, and this happened to, see, my family's from Lebanon. And about a year ago, there was a huge bomb in Lebanon. And many of my friends were fine. But 4 months later, 5 months later, they started to show elements of trauma. And one of them actually said, I was watching a movie on Netflix and it just triggered it. It just triggered the traumatic memories. And now he's in therapy, which is fine. But like, this is how it can happen. And it's important that the kids understand this, that while you're 8, and this can even go when you have kids who are 7, 8, and 9 years old, and they're starting to kill things on in a game, there could be some consequences in the future. And this goes without, games like SimCity and Tetris are actually very good for your brain. But I've had kids ask me, all right, so can I play 1 hour a day? I answer his question with a question that, what's healthier for you? A Big Mac or a salad? You'll say a salad. I'm like, okay. So even your doctor says you can have a Big Mac once a week. So nothing would happen to you. But you can't argue with me that if you had a salad instead, it would be better. So that's what I tell the kids. That's what I tell the student, that if you want to play 1 hour a day, that's fine. But if you chose to read the book in that hour, you cannot deny that it would have been better for your health. Or if you chose to go for a run or done something else. But in the same time, I have to meet them halfway. I can't expect to enact this dictatorial mentality on a child. No, we have to roll with resistance, as they say, which is actually my next slide. So the question is, okay, now what? So I know all of this. What can I do to make sure that I'm meeting the child halfway? So the first thing first, I would always recommend is psychoeducation. So now that we've talked about some elements of gaming, it's important to increase awareness on the topic, which can promote more objective thinking. And we see this in private practice as well, when you outline to a client how their thinking might be flawed or dysfunctional, and then all of a sudden it becomes functional through your help. Whenever they encounter the stressful situation, again, they are far more objective and far more resilient as well. So similarly with you're gonna have those like high functioning students who don't want to face all of these consequences. And they might actually think, you know what, I agree with Miss Counselor, I'm gonna do it. And they might actually convince their friends to be more objective about it, be more aware of what they're doing. I would always talk about functional analysis would be highly useful in this situation. So understanding why I game, so the antecedents, what led me to gaming? Maybe I was bored, maybe I was feeling upset, maybe I want to reward myself. So it's important to know the antecedents that result in gaming. And then obviously the consequences of gaming. So what has happened now? Oh, my back hurts. I have a headache. My eyes are in pain. I'm 2 hours behind on my math homework, but I had a good time. So, obviously now when that's all clearer to the student, he or she can make a more sagacious decision. So this helps challenge unhealthy cognition, such as I can't help it, I'm addicted, I'm too far down the rabbit hole. Gaming means everything to me. These are some statements that you can actually encounter with gaming addicts. Similar to a substance addiction, where all of a sudden they've personalized the substance and made it a friend or a companion. The same thing would happen in a game. And showing the student that there are other ways to achieve not the same, similar solace would be very, very useful. And I think a function analysis would be definitely helpful with that. Now, this is a controversial one. You might disagree with me, but please think about it. Incorporate gaming elements into schoolwork. This helps satisfy cravings through regulated doses and is tailored to each student gamer. Now, in my practice, I am working with kids who have gaming addiction, and I do this in my practice. Sometimes I incorporate metaphors or storylines from a game into practice, so that the student doesn't feel as if he is betraying the game. He's still honoring and respecting his love for the game, but in a more regulated way. It's almost like microdosing, where the coursework that he's writing for English class or the experiment he's doing for science class does incorporate some elements of the game. Not only will that probably ensure a higher grade on the assignment, but it will also allow the student to feel fulfilled and not have to game as much. Now, this obviously has a risk that it might activate or validate his desire to game, but nothing comes without risk, I believe. And it's a fun way to show the student that you're also on his side. Coping mechanisms. So teaching the student coping mechanisms that give him the same, or give her the same, not the same, sorry, similar benefit would definitely be useful. And I would say make scheduling mandatory homework. So maybe in one or two classes, if you guys have a class that can fit this, teaching students that schedules don't need to be a nuisance. They're actually very fun if used correctly. They allow you to design the ideal day. They allow you to live the day that you think is the best day ever. But adding the caveat that nothing in life is for free. So you have to pay something for living this day. And that payment sometimes includes 2 hours of math homework, 3 hours of chemistry homework, or 1 hour of biology homework. The whole point is to convince the student slowly but surely that your payment of chemistry homework is not going to the bank. It's actually coming back to you in the long run. And the more mature the student is, the more likely he or she will internalize that belief. But I would highly work around scheduling and combining that with functional analyses. It will be much easier to regulate or monitor the students' gaming habits. All right, so, and guys, I highly apologize for powering through this, but again, I really want to get the information across and have some time to speak to you. The second part is Instagram or instant gratification. Now, while social media is not confined to only Instagram, Instagram is the most potent and pervasive app across all age groups. And I think it's the one that needs to be discussed mostly today. I've used the spin-off instant gratification because that is one of the most poisonous legs of the Instagram scorpion. The instant gratification it gives students is what brings students back to it. Now, as always, we need to understand a bit of the neuromechanics behind social media use. Now, and I'm sure most of you know this, the dichotomy of the emotional versus the rational brain. Obviously, we don't literally have an emotional or rational brain. These are more composites of different brain regions that form metaphysical components we call the emotional and rational brain. But for all intents and purposes, the emotional brain is a far older one, probably a more dumber one, I would say, than the rational brain. The rational brain does include our prefrontal cortex, which is definitely the most advanced part of our brain, I would say. And if you apply this to Instagram, let's say someone gets 100 likes on a post. That is highly validating, highly reinforcing, and it's definitely gonna result in a deluge of dopamine in the brain. But that's because the person is in emotional overdrive. In that situation, when you get those red icons just flashing on your phone, it's highly validating. Let's say you got 100 likes. Let's say you had the wherewithal to actually look at each like. After looking at all the likes, you came to the conclusion that, okay, 10 likes are robots. 10 likes I've never met in my life. 20 likes, I've met them once in my life, so they can't really validate the fact that I'm a runner or my dress looks nice. So now we're at 60. All right, you know what? 60 are actually my friends who I care about, so it's actually 60 likes. Now you see how much time that took me. That took time and effort. We are cognitive misers, which means we are cheap when it comes to spending mental fuel. Nobody wants to engage in that much pensive thinking. We just want to go straight to the reward. Why can't I just believe that I got 100 likes? Why can't I just stop there? Well, obviously you can. No one's stopping you, but that's not authentic or reflective of what your inner value is, which is you are now a runner or your dress looks nice. And, you know, as much as we want to believe that, when we are in emotional overdrive, you know, it really does reinforce this comfort zone that we have created. Going back to what Carl Jung spoke about with this persona or this mask, we evince this mask online and we do whatever we can to reinforce it. That creates a virtual comfort zone from which we don't want to budge out of, because all of a sudden, if we start looking at our likes rationally, it's not 100 likes, it's 60 likes. So I'm 40% less popular than I thought I was. 40? Yeah, 40% less popular than I thought I was. And nobody wants to feel that. No one wants that, but that is the truth. And this is where I think it's important to explain to students that what exactly are you chasing on the app? Now, it's important to understand, again, the neurochemistry behind this, guys. So obviously, when you talk about social media addiction, it's not a psychological condition. But, you know, MRI studies have shown that the brain of a social media addict is very similar to someone who's addicted to a harmful substance, such as alcohol. So that does have implications for us. Now, when you talk about the way we communicate online versus the way we communicate in face-to-face, studies have shown that when you talk in face-to-face, 30% of the content in a conversation is about yourself. But in online relationships, it's actually 80%. Your inhibitors are far looser when you're online, because you decide exactly what image is evinced. Again, going back to the gaming, how many photo editing apps are there available on the App Store today? And these apps just, again, reinforce this self-image that students are trying to portray online. And the more likes they get, the more traction they get, the more cemented the self-image is. But the second they go to the real world and they find out that the fruit that they reaped from this self-image is not actually present, it could lead to a psychological conflict. And, you know, not to mention other conditions, because hang on a minute, I thought you guys believed that I was a runner. So why are you not treating me like a runner? Hang on a minute, I thought you guys all like my dress, so why aren't you buying the same dress? Or why are you not complimenting my dress now that you're with me? And this is where the shadow starts to come to life. And nobody wants their shadow to come to life. We want to keep him in the bottom pits of hell. We don't want him to come to life, but, you know, it's very Hamarshi. We are responsible for our own downfall. And when this self-image is reinforced, the same brain regions involved in relationships or love, the limbic system is on fire in this situation, because we are achieving a goal that we want. And this goes back to the instant gratification. Right now, right here, these 100 likes feels good. Correct decision to buy that dress and not that dress. Correct decision. I feel very good about myself. I want more and I want more. And you guys know this. The brain is highly plastic, so the brain will start to rewire itself and make you think that this is the best way to get pleasure, essentially. Keep that pleasure train going. And this is very interesting here, guys. So evolutionary speaking, besides black and white, obviously, red is the most salient color to the human eye. And the reason for that is because red foods symbolized a nutritious food, or a non-poisonous one, for that matter. And because red is so salient to us, this is why the psychologists that Instagram or Mark Zuckerberg hired told him to make the icons red. Because, see, when you get that red icon on Instagram, that 20 or whatever, you have to physically click in it to see what's behind the red door. What's behind the red door of interest? How can I satiate my craving for that red strawberry or red apple? I have to go and grab it and take a bite. And all of a sudden, when you click on that red icon, you see that X person liked your photo. Let's say, for example, X person is your ex-boyfriend or ex-girlfriend. How validating is that? The dopamine rush that's gonna ensue from that is gonna be far greater than if it was a random person, and that can happen. So the red icons are how Instagram makes more money, essentially. The more you interact with the app, the more money it makes, the more they tailor the ads to your liking. And that's how corporations win. Now, there are two ways in which social media use can have negative effects on us. The first one is FOMO. And see, this is pretty straightforward, guys. You see your friends at a party you were not invited to. That triggers feelings of social rejection, which activates same parts of the brain as if you were feeling physical pain. Now, you go back to school on Sunday morning and you see those friends. You think to yourself, if you're a 15-year-old, 14-year-old kid, especially if you're a girl, because girls are far more comparative than boys. Should I talk to them? Do they not like me anymore? If they like me, they would invite me to the party. But like, why would they not like me? I didn't do anything to them. Then you start overthinking and thinking, maybe 3 months ago, you forgot to tell them something, and you start to blame yourself. And you start to have this self-doubt, and it might affect the way you perform in math class at 9:45. And it's just a cycle of events that might actually result in the onset of a condition. So it's very important to understand that these apps in purpose are dysfunctional. We as human beings, yes, we are a highly social species. That's why we have the largest brain to body mass ratio in the entire animal kingdom. But we were never socialized to know what everyone else is doing. If you go back in time to the ancient days, we were very tribal and territorial. All we cared about was our nuclear family and our tribesmen or tribesmen. We never really cared about what our cousin in Mexico was doing. But now with Instagram, that's the case. And because of that, and you add into that upward social comparisons where you start comparing yourselves to other people, it's a recipe for disaster, especially in people who already have low self-esteem. On the note of social comparisons, guys, we as human beings, we love numbers. That cannot be disputed. For example, when you apply to university, all right, they ask for predicted grades, which are numbers. They don't ask for they don't ask for the counselors like Miss Susie to say, describe this boy to me. Is he a good student? What's his grade? We want the number. It's a fact, it's objective. It gives me my reward right here, right now. Instagram exploits this tremendously. Instagram uses parameters such as likes, shares, comments, and whatnot to dictate who is an idol and who is a phony, when in fact they're all phony. And that's how you can have false idols. When you see someone with 10,000 likes per post, due to the credibility bias, you automatically assign value to that person. And I actually see this with anorexia or bulimia cults, where people are encouraging anorexic behavior on Instagram, and these people have like 10,000 likes. So a 13, 14-year-old girl who does not have the social wherewithal to discern a phony from a real person will just say, you know what, he did it and he has 10,000 likes. So obviously if I do it, I'm gonna get 10,000 likes. And there we go. All of a sudden, that student fell down the social media whirlpool, and it's very hard to get her back out. And this goes to show you how these companies don't really care about, and that's why, by the way, Canada and New Zealand and I think Australia banned number of likes for this very reason, to protect kids from these effects. But the damage has already been done for the past 10 years. Now, obviously, to be a bit more prescriptive. So when talking to your students about social media, something I would always say is, don't be afraid to unfollow. Many students are afraid to unfollow their ex-boyfriend or ex-girlfriend because they don't want to seem like they're a child. But nothing comes before your own mental well-being. If that makes you feel good, go ahead, do it. And don't ask other people, what do you think I should do, bro? Should I do it? Should I not do it? It's your life. Nobody knows your life more than you. The second one is audit your socials. Now, many times we just go on Instagram because we're bored. We're waiting in the car for a brother to come. We have 5 minutes to kill. Or maybe we're eating, and while we're eating, we want to distract ourselves from how full we're getting, so we just go on Instagram. Or maybe we're just curious to know what's happening, on a Thursday night. So there's a reason why we enter Instagram. Now, if the reason was I am just bored, then I'm sure we can find something else for you to do. That's not a problem. We'll give you another task to, occupy your mind. But sometimes, let's say, for example, you want to beat the system by not checking Instagram for no reason. Let's say your friend called you and said, did you see John's suit? He looks so good in a suit. So you go on Instagram, search for John's suit, look at it, and then that's it, put the phone away. Because guys, that loading icon, when you swipe your feet down, that loading icon is a huge ocean for potential dopamine, because what comes after it are like 20 posts and many stories, and you want to see what people are doing, especially if people are doing what you deem to be correct behavior. Let's say, for example, you like a girl and you see that one of your friends posted a story with that girl, and you think, perfect, I now have an avenue into that girl's heart because I'm going to talk to her through my friend, and I've confirmed that my friend is her friend through Instagram. And that's where the whirlpool starts to emerge. If you know why you want to use Instagram, go complete your function and leave. So know when to set the limit. And this is a rather tough one, but if it works, it will be amazing. Establish sanctuaries. So have places in your house where you cannot have the phone. Ideally, that would be around your bed, because when you're in bed, that's where social media use tends to get a bit more violent. And you don't want that to be the last thing you see before you sleep and the first thing you see when you wake up. So I would suggest have these sanctuaries, like these, holy places or cantonment areas where the phone cannot enter. And that gives you that much needed break from this godforsaken device. And on that note, I will end with the most important message for life, that moderation is key. I'll take a breath now. Thank you for listening, guys. I'm sorry for going so fast, but as you see, there was so much information. Any questions?
There are loads of questions for you. You have been so popular, and it's always so refreshing to hear you. Catherine, would you invite the speakers? It's really been, it has been so resonating with quite a few of most of the participants, and I think that they have a few questions for you.
Yes, we have. Sue Grace, if you'd like to ask your first question. Are you with us? Yeah.
Yes, I'm very much in. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Susie. And most importantly, thank you, Fred. Such a relevant topic. So my question is, as a school counselor, and this resonates with a lot of the participants, I'm sure, what can we do or suggest practical strategies to parents who come with their hands in the air saying that the kid is already addicted, like anything, a working tool, something that we can offer?
I would definitely go with a function analysis. Let's find out why the kid is addicted. There must be a reason why. If the kid is addicted because, for example, let's say he gets bullied by his older brother and he wants to cope by going to game, and we solve the bullying part, we've already mitigated the effects greatly. Let's say the kid is upset about something else. I mean, most of the times, kids will resort to gaming for emotional reasons. They want to be cool like their friends, because their friends all play this game, so we want to play this game. They want to replace math homework with gaming because gaming gives them more of a reward. So with a function analysis, they first of all understand why they game and what happens if they game. And now the parents can help can condition the gaming. So can assign operant conditioning rules onto the gaming, where if you want a game, fine, you have to pay a price. Now that price can come in the form of homework or doing the dishes or whatnot. And that is a very easy way to say, but it's a very hard way to apply. I get it. Some parents have 2 jobs, 3 jobs. It's very hard. But I really think that the most important thing would be to identify the triggers that lead to heavy gaming, or like excessive gaming. There must be something that pushes the child towards the game.
Thank you. We have another question around gaming and the effects it may have on clinically medicated kids. So would it negate the effects of medication or make them ineffective?
Okay.
Have you found that?
See, that's a very broad question. There's so many medications in the world, but I never like to leave a question unanswered. So let's say, for example, you're talking about stimulants like methylphenidates or like Ritalin or Adderall, medications used to treat ADHD or even some traits of autism. In situations like that, when the child is taking these brain activators, I would suggest to reduce or better much avoid the gaming completely, because the purpose of those medications is to put the child in a state of hyper focus, to help him focus on the math assignment, to help him focus to read the chemistry book, to help him focus on the game. Essentially, the child will not especially if you're talking about someone who's 12 years or younger, does not have a well-fit moral compass to think like this. Dad is paying tuition. I have to do well. I have to get a good uni. I have to get a good job. I have to make some money. That moral compass is not fully fit at that age. The child just thinks, I want to have fun. I want to play. I want to play. And you notice that children tend to use what we call circumlocutions in those situations. So instead of saying the sentence completely, I am bored and I would like to satisfy my boredom using gaming, I want a game. It's very short, very impulsive, very reactive. So in those situations, I'd be wary of that. But in terms of other medications, to the best of my knowledge, I don't see a link.
Can I just add on that, Fred, that, I think 2 or 3 years ago, it was said in US that we believe that for children who are ADHD, it is good to game. So it has really here put off people here because we don't know exactly, we have seen them being more aggressive, being more absent-minded and doing the counter effect. So where do we go with that, And then now I know psychiatrists who are suggesting this, and in school it's not working. We have defined behavior, really aggressive behavior. What's your call on that?
Okay, good to game is a hyper vague statement. Now, what does good to game mean? Now, obviously, we have different intensities of ADHD, but I like to present a balanced argument here, guys. Now, video games in general teach you how to focus attention. They teach you how to persevere until you achieve the final goal. And they do so in a very systematic manner. So level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, not level 4, level 7. So it's very systematic. And, because of that, like Tetris, for example, in a game like Tetris, you know that you have to predict 4 moves ahead before you complete your move right now. That engages your frontal lobe really well, which is something very implicated in people with ADHD. And besides that, I would say that in those contexts, when the game is strictly for educational and/or informational purposes, I would say it could be beneficial for kids with ADHD. But let's be frank, guys. What kid with ADHD is going to play Tetris? That's not going to happen. A kid with ADHD is just going to go to what the cool kids are doing. Sport games, wrestling games, killing games, adventure games. This is where that statement, it's good to game, can actually be a nefarious one. Like games that have imaginative play, for example. I would say that's somewhat acceptable. It does promote that, right hemispheric muscle where the child starts to explore new potentials. Like, okay, what, SimCity, I need to imagine a few things, but it's not so far away from reality that it engages a completely different part of the brain. The whole idea, guys, is that when the game has functions like, focusing, solving a problem, predicting steps in the future, I would say, yeah, it could help the child. But when does a child play a game like that? That will be my counter question.
Thank you. And we have a question from Nilanjana. Nilanjana, are you there?
Yes, Miss Catherine. Hi.
Hi, how are you doing? I haven't seen you for ages.
Yes, I'm great. I'm doing great. Thank you.
Great to have you. Well, what's your question?
Yes, I wanted to ask this question that recently I've been observing our children who are heavy gamers. Their written expression is pretty scanty, like comparing it to children who are better readers. These children, they produce less when they are given a comprehension. The produced work is less. They write in monosyllables, or if they are doing anything to do with creative writing, the area explored is less. Is there any relation to this?
Okay. See, what I find in for example, there has been this ongoing debate: should kids who are 7 have the iPad? And you see that a lot in kids. You have kids who are 7 to 10 years old now. They master the iPad more than their mom or dad does. Now, while that does have a lot of benefits, obviously it provides information much faster. The problem with that is, let's say, for example, me and you were in a dark room, all right? And I asked, and I gave you a book, and I said, please read 1 line or 2 lines from it. you would have to use your visual acuity. You would have to really flex your eye muscles, bring the book closer to you, maybe even squint to read something. But let's say we were in the same dark room and I gave you my phone and I told you, can you please read the article? What are you going to do? You're going to pull it down, put brightness maximum. When you do that, your eyes don't need to flex their muscles so much because the phone is doing it for the eye. So the eye muscles can just take a vacation because the phone has now provided the eye with an artificial backup that will not be there when the person is in a different situation. Over years, over time, that could lead to visual deficits, definitely. It could maybe like, that's why you have, nowadays, the rate of glasses wearing has increased, diplopia and all of these different conditions, because the eye muscles at a very young age, when they are already very weak, are not being used adequately. Because if you take a book and you bring the book closer to your eye and you really, accommodate the lens onto the word, that's the whole point of the lens in the eye. But if I take my phone and I put full brightness, I'm not really doing anything with my lens. So over time, that could result in things like maybe dyslexia or reduced vision. In terms of output, creative output, in my research, I've never come across a link yet, but if I would have to say off the top of my head, games also use circumlocutions. You have, like, for example, ready, set, go, the most basic example I can give you. It's not like, are you ready? Then you can set, now you can, it's the whole point of a game is to get there fast. And with speed comes a drop in accuracy. So you're not being very accurate in the sentence. And kids become a master at that. But maybe it's to do, I would think, with motivation probably. Maybe the kid is just not motivated to write. Not everything is linked to gaming, but gaming does have plenty of links, I would say. Thank you for your question.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Nilandra. Now we'll take our two final questions from Reem. Are you still with us, Reem? I feel like I'm a medium in a seance. Are you with us? Maybe Reem might. Yeah, are you with us, Reem?
Yes.
Just about. Yeah, if you'd like to ask.
Yeah, my two questions are, number one, what are the 3 top signs that tell me that the child is becoming addictive now to gaming? My other question, how do I know that I am, as an adult, I'm addictive to social media? Can you give us like 3 top signs that will tell us about this? Thank you.
So with the kid, one way to really know if the child is addicted to the point where it's a problem, you can try an experiment. Ask him to not game. Take the computer away from him and see his reaction. If it's, yeah, okay, sure, no, that's a bit of annoying, but whatever, okay, that's better. But if the kid devolves into a tantrum or an emotional outburst, then you know that, okay, we're dealing with something wrong here. You can think about it even when we're adults. Let's say you have someone who, there's no need to talk about that now, it's not going to be appropriate, but one way to know is that. So take the game away from the child, but not in an aggressive way. Just, in a friendly way, not in a way that he's being punished. No, in a way that I just want to see what happens and see his reaction. If it's just, Mom, why are you taking my game? Just no reason. I just want to talk to you and just, let's do something else. Let's go for a walk, you and I. Yeah, sure. Okay, whatever. Okay, then it's fine. But if he resorts to, shouting and screaming and maybe wants to grab it from you, all right, then we have something to worry about. Another way is I would monitor physiology. So, eating. How is he eating well? Is he sleeping well? That's a good way to really gauge it, I would think. And plus, I think as a parent, you are allowed to see what the game is about. If the game has some certain words or terms and the child starts to really use them, then you know that he's spending too much time on the game, because the point of the game is not to learn language, if you know what I mean. It's to have fun. Now, for adults, I would say monitor your mood. If you ever found yourself doing this, then you probably have a social media issue. If you ever posted something on Instagram, didn't get enough likes, deleted the post, and posted it again an hour later, then okay, something, you clearly have an ulterior motive. Something else is on your mind. Another way you could find out is if you check who views your story, and if you check if this person in specific liked your post, then you do know that you're using social media for another purpose. These are things to be cautious of. I think we have one more question, correct?
No, I think that was it. We have a comment, but that's it for the questions, I think. Does anybody else have any questions? If you'd like to just chime in.
I'm reading the comments now. You're very, very welcome, guys. You're very, very welcome.
It has been very, how do you say, explanatory, and I love the 4 points that you have given as for school counselor at the end. That was very clear, something very easy to give back to parents, and I think that's just great.
My page.
Now I've shared, I've shared the Instagram page just earlier. I'll copy it in again now and put it on the chat. This is Farid's Instagram page, everybody, if you'd like to follow. And Fred, your passion really comes across clearly. Like you're actually excited about what you're talking about, which makes it so interesting and engaging. It's fabulous.
Thank
it's
you
been
so
a really, really great talk, and thank you so much.
You're very welcome, guys. You're very welcome.
If anybody has any questions for Farid, guys, you can find him on his Instagram account or on his LinkedIn, which I've shared, and I will share again in our forum email. I'll pop out an email tomorrow with a summary of the session and sharing the recording. Thank you so much, Farid, and thanks, Susie, for bringing what is such a brilliant speaker.
Welcome. It's so worth it. Absolutely. Fred, see you soon.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Gosh, he was brilliant. Really good.
Told you it was really, and it's exactly what